Colgan 3407, contact tower 120.5. Have a good night.
3407.
Colgan 3407, approach. Colgan 3407, Buffalo. Colgan 3407, approach. Colgan 3407, Buffalo.
What caused Colgan 3407? The date was February 12th, 2009, after 10 o'clock in the evening, just a couple days before Valentine's Day in 2009. Colgan 3407 was a crash from a few years ago. Buffalo, New York, kind of changed all the rules. Big game changer for you CFIs. What do you remember? What caused that crash?
From everything that I can remember was the cause of the crash. What they said was a little bit of inexperienced captain and co-pilot, and from what I can recall, it had to do with icing systems and not getting iced properly. And I think there might have been a crew breakdown or something of that sort, that one wasn't as experienced as they might have needed to be, but all I remember is that it changed my hours quite drastically.
In your best guess, what do you think caused Colgan 3407, Buffalo, New York? What caused that crash?
So based on what I've heard and what normally people around the industry talk about, is that it was mainly caused by an inexperienced flight crew, icing, and some, I guess, pretty much inexperience in that sense.
A big crash that caused the 1,500-hour rule that we have today. What caused that crash?
I believe it was pilot error as a result of a tailplane stall, as a result of ice accumulating on the horizontal stabilizer and the crew acting incorrectly.
The cause of the crash was, people like to say it was based on inexperience of the captain and the first officer. Fatigue also was a play in that crash. And the airlines, they've come out with regulations to get around fatigue and make sure pilots have a little more rest. And then I also looked into it a little, and there was some ice possibly, but the big thing was pilot inexperience is what they said the issue with it was.
There's a crash a few years ago, Colgan 3407 up in Buffalo. It changed all the rules for you as a CFI. Now you gotta have 1,500 hours ATP to do anything. That crash was huge. It changed everything. What caused that crash?
I do not personally know, honestly. If I had to give a guess, like most crashes, it would probably be overwork, underpay, or some form of pilot fatigue. But I don't know the exact root cause.
So what's your best guess on what caused the Buffalo, New York crash, Colgan 3407, 2009? What do you remember about it, and what caused that crash?
Yeah, I know, if I remember correctly, there were a lot of distractions. They ignored they were fighting the stick shaker. I think there was also bad CRM as well. It's been a couple years since I've looked at it, or since I studied it. But I know one of the big things with it was, they're young pilots or whatever, but I think there were a lot of distractions. They flew into known icing. They were really icy. I just remember them doing a lot of things incorrectly when I read over it, a lot of procedural things that experience might not have played as much of a factor in as people may think.
Inexperience may not have played as much of a factor in it as people may think.
Experience might not have played as much of a factor in as people may think.
Dan Brider, probable cause. Site of Colgan 3407 is a Continental carrier carrying passengers for Continental Airlines on the evening of February 12th, 2009. Captain Renslow, First Officer Shaw, Rebecca Shaw. Captain Renslow had 3,300 flight hours. Rebecca Shaw had 2,200, both ATPs. This is the spot where it hit right here. This is the memorial on Long Street in New York, and this crash location is directly on final. the location directly above us here is just outside the outer marker for runway 24 at Buffalo International. The shape of this memorial on the ground here is the shape of the position that the wings ended up in here that night. But we ended up talking to several neighbors around here. The neighbors, which is very unique in this neighborhood, most of the people still living in this neighborhood were actually here that night, and most of them remember it very well. Most of them were awoken in the middle of the night by the sound of this crash. We have one interview that we were able to capture from an actual eyewitness, a guy named Matt. Let's take a look at that next. The interesting thing is Matt was actually here. Matt actually witnessed this. Tell me what you saw that night. You were telling me that you were in your apartment, which is 100 yards that way, but you heard it and then saw it.
Yep. So that night I was in my bedroom, and I'm just naturally an observant person. And that night I heard a prop plane coming, and the thing that caught my ear was the fact that instead of a nice steady noise of the prop plane, I could hear pulsations with the engine.
A pitch change, kind of.
Yep. And so I got up from my chair. I was in my back bedroom watching TV, and I looked out my window and I actually saw the plane come out of the southwest direction at about 30-40 degrees and struck the house where the memorial site is right now.
So you saw it fall, but it disappeared below this tree line, so you didn't see the actual impact. You saw it come out of the sky.
I did not see the impact. No, I saw it, and then it disappeared for about a second, and then I saw the explosion.
Yeah, but you were real close.
Yes.
You were very close. And then you were telling me about the people that were in the house. We're standing on the vacant lawn of where there used to be a house, and that house had a mom and a dad and a daughter in it at the time.
Yep.
The dad didn't make it out, but the mom and daughter did.
Yes. Yep. So my sister and my sister-in-law were coming to check on their sister, my other sister-in-law, who was on the other side of the memorial here, and we were coming down Long Street here, and as we were coming down, we saw the mother and the daughter. The daughter was hysterical, as you can imagine, and they went to my neighbor's house, and I just remember vividly about how she was asking, help my daughter, help my daughter.
Yeah. So after the crash, you're talking about coming down Long Street. You were running down the street because it's after 10 o'clock at night. You're running this way to try to figure out what's going on, and that's when you encountered the two, probably in their pajamas or something, no shoes, came out of the burning, what was left of that house, trying to get away from it.
I didn't see them come out. They were already on the street.
I see.
But we knew who they were.
Yeah.
When they were over at my neighbor's house. So.
Yeah. So the accident changed a whole lot of laws and regulations, and that's kind of what I want to talk about in this video that I may eventually make off something like that. But coming up with people like you that were actually here that night, and especially you're the first person I've ever heard of that was an actual witness to it. Out of all the stuff I've read, I never realized there was an actual eyewitness to it. That's really amazing.
Yeah. The only other one that I know that saw the plane coming down was a gentleman driving on Clarence Center Road. He saw it, I believe, out his front windshield as he was coming down past the fire department.
Yeah.
That's the only person that I know of actually saw the plane coming down.
Yeah. Wow. Pretty wild. Well, I've talked to a bunch of the neighbors around here already. Almost all your neighbors are still original to that night. Most of them are still here, and most of them were here that night, although most of them were in bed asleep.
Yes. Yep.
And the guy across the street, him and his wife were sound asleep, and they looked out their window and they said they thought it was, they looked out and saw the house was gone and this fire and smoke. They thought it was a gas explosion initially, but they had no idea. It took them a little while to figure out what had happened here.
Yep.
And then tell me about the shape of this memorial here. The memorial is here. What is this sidewalk arrangement?
So it's designed in the shape of an airplane wing, and each tread, there's a tread for every victim of the crash.
Right.
That's on top of the outline there.
So the wings of the airplane were basically oriented right here, the cockpit kind of right about there, and the tail back here, but it came real close to this brick house here.
Yes.
I mean,
it came really close.
Really close to that brick house.
Yes. Yep. That was something I'll never forget. Very vivid that night.
And how many people were in the brick house at the time?
There was three.
Three in there?
Three. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, This is a Q400. It's a very large airplane.
Mm-hmm.
To park a Q400 in this lot right here without damaging anything else around it.
It's very fortunate that how it landed and that it didn't, take out more houses. Definitely unfortunate. Obviously unfortunate what happened, but
yeah,
it could have been a lot worse.
Could have been a lot
definitely.
worse. So Matt's recollection of this was that it was about 30 to 40 degrees nose down. It was actually much steeper than that. Matt's not a pilot, so he doesn't really understand. What he saw was the airplane coming down, but the fact that this airplane hit and is contained, there's a house here and a house here. A Q400 impacted vertically right here. This is the spot where it hit. The nose ended up right about here. The NTSB got a couple things wrong in their report. One of them is that they said the captain's last words on the CVR was, "We're down." That's not actually correct either. The captain's last words were, "We're dead." He knew just before impact, the very last thing he said, Rebecca was screaming, the captain on this sitting in the left seat said, "We're dead." He knew that there was no recovering from this. Let's talk about the recovery from this accident. What should have been the training and recovery technique? Number one, we should have used prevention. Prevention of a low-speed environment should have prevented this low-speed environment from ever occurring. Their speed tape should have showed them to keep them a long ways away from being anywhere even close to a stall. They got it too slow. The problem was, in those days, stall recovery technique said that their pass-fail criteria was minus 100 to plus anything. So in stall recovery, you give it full power. You're only allowed to lose 100 feet, and if you lose 101 feet, it's a bust. Everybody is trained to give it full power and pull aft. The captain pulled aft on the yoke, fighting the stick pusher. He pulled aft as he was trained by the FAA to not lose more than 100 feet. They were only 900 feet in the air when this whole scenario occurred. He fought like a tiger to hold on and not bust this FAA criteria of minus 100 to plus anything. He would have been successful, except Rebecca Shaw, her flight training was full power, clean the airplane up. On the CVR is 2 clicks, click, click. Rebecca actually says in the CVR, she says, "I put the flaps up, is that okay?" or something to that effect. She actually documents that she moved the flap handle first, then told him what he did. At that point, it's over. This is already in an aerodynamic stall, low speed scenario, full power. The captain is pulling and Rebecca puts the flaps up. This airplane rolls over and contacts the ground vertically. Flight training changed on that day. Flight training changed from that technique to a new technique called get light in the seat. We don't care how much altitude you lose, just don't let the wing stall. Lower the nose and let this wing fly. Get this thing nose down as much as you need to. FAA's prior training for all prior to this was do not lose altitude, which means you have to pull on that yoke really hard. The crazy thing that I'm the most fired up about is the fact that because of this accident, we changed fatigue laws, which are unrelated. We also changed flight training minimums laws so that now students have to have 1,500 hours and an ATP to get a low-paying $40,000 a year job. Back in 2009, 10, 11, when all this stuff changed and that law became active because it went through Congress, you're now required to have 1,500 hours and an ATP to get an entry level at some menial schmuck-paying job, which is ridiculous. That's what's causing our pilot shortage. We did not have anybody going in the pipeline directly after this. College kids are looking at this and saying, I'm not spending 1,500 hours and getting an ATP so I can get this low-paying job flying for a regional and having to commute to work. Not going to do it. That's one of the major things that's contributed to our pilot shortage today that we are really experiencing right now was this accident right here. The whole thing is completely absurd. Captain Renslow had 3,300. Rebecca Shaw had 2,200 hours. They were both ATPs. but the only law that got changed out of this of any significance is now requiring all students going to fly for any Part 121 carrier or any regional to have 1,500 hours and an ATP. The whole thing is completely absurd, and it all happened right here. Our deepest respects and condolences to all 51 people that died that night. There was actually 45 passengers on board, crew of 4, which makes it 50, and then one of the women on board was actually pregnant and with child, about to have a baby. That makes 51. 51 lives lost is what they're counting. 51 steps on this sidewalk going to the memorial, and I've wanted to come here for a long time. This one is earth-shaking. I'm going to show you some more video. Let's go take a look at the airplane animation recreation video now. I'm going to show you exactly what happened. Here you are flying along 174 knots, 2,300 feet. This is level flight, and everything's good. In the lower right-hand corner, you see the power at about 30%. That's your throttles. Condition levers, absolute 0. Power's coming up just a tad. Flaps 0. He says flaps 5. She says what? He has to say flaps 5, please.
3407, 3 miles from Clump, turn left, heading 260. Maintain 2,300 till established. Localized and cleared out, approach runway 23.
Left 260, 2,300 till established and cleared out, 23 approach, Colgan 3407.
Everything's still good. 180 knots is a good speed. 2,300 feet, they're level flight. Everything's good. Power's set. Condition is still minimum. Flaps are still 5. All right, approach is armed. She says, roger. Now watch what happens next here. They're flying along level flight, but the airplane starts to accelerate a little bit. There's 183. It's going to go 184. It's going to start picking up. He's got a little bit too much power in it here. 187, 188, starting to go too fast. He's got too much throttle in here for level flight in flaps 5. Now he wants to slow down, so he's brought the throttle back a little bit, and he did not know he's probably started to slow this thing up too much. Gear down, Lokes alive.
Colgan 3407, contact tower 120.5. Have a good night.
3407.
Now the conditional levers go to high, which is even more drag, and all of a sudden the power's back, the conditional levers are high, flaps 5, and watch this. He asks for gear down, flaps 15 before landing checklist. He asked for flaps 15, and she only took it to 10. See that indicator? Now the power is way high, and you're only at flaps 10. He's got the nose up. He's doing his stall recovery technique by pulling aft and trying to not lose altitude. Notice he's still he's fighting to hold on to that 2,300 feet. He fought really hard until it lost all aerodynamic capability, and it stalled and spun, and that's how this airplane hit.
Colgan 3407, approach.
So that's the animation. You can see this thing rolled hard and it went vertical. At the very end, the final act that caused this was Rebecca's putting the flaps up. The thing that really set this up was 3 things. Not recognizing a low-speed environment, which is about to bite you. The airplane was getting slow. When they got the stick shaker, their improper response, which was fully trained by the FAA, they did exactly what the FAA told them to do. They added power and pull. That's exactly what the FAA told them to do. Rebecca's training to clean the airplane up was improper, but it was also FAA approved. She was trained by the FAA to clean the airplane up. That is the recipe, and the FAA and NTSB never figured that out. It's FAA training, FAA check ride that actually caused this accident, but they won't tell you that in the report. That's what caused Colgan 3407. The date was February 12th, 2009, after 10 o'clock in the evening, just a couple days before Valentine's Day in 2009. Tragic accident, killed everybody on the airplane and even killed one on the ground. What you think caused Colgan 3407 and what the actual truth is are 2 different things. That's what we want to look at in this video. I think when you see the whole thing and see my explanation, I think you're going to agree. Our U.S. government fell down on the job. Flight training, conditioning. It has to do with stall recovery and what the FAA taught, approved, and checked for check rides for stall recovery for the crew of 3407 and all flight crews during that time. It used to be that flight crews inexperience, icing, fatigue. Those are the three that your U.S. government wants you to think was the cause of this. Inexperience is what caused the House bill to be created. Let's look at the lady who created this. Her name is Kristen Gilliland. Let's take a look at this. Here's S3010. Mrs. Gilliland introduced the following bill, which was read twice and referred to the Committee on Commerce and Science and Transportation. A bill. Under Section 1, it says this act may be cited as the Flight 3407 Memorial Act. Ms. Gilliland wants to make a bill as a memorial. Now, since when is legislation designed to memorialize the victims? Legislation is laws. It's not designed to give comfort to the victims. That's what they've actually done here. Let's take a look at who Ms. Gilliland from New York is. I'll give you a little bit of background here. Here's Ms. Gilliland right here. Here's her webpage. Kirsten Gilliland, how can I help you? Well, she was pretty involved with the Clintons. She was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager when Hillary ran for president. She's been pretty close with Hillary the entire time. I mean, like, really close. She's not much on guns, as you can tell from this. And she's also been involved in lots of speeches and Democratic Party things. She ran for president herself on the Democratic ticket in 2020. Gillibrand ran for president, but she did not make it. She's also been really close with the Bidens and the Obamas and all that. She's a deep-seated Democrat from New York. God bless her. Let's look at the other guy that also sponsored this bill, Charles Schumer, Democrat from New York. Here's what he says, working side by side with the friends and family of the 50 Americans lost. They're talking about the 1,500-hour rule, and they concluded, look at this, which concluded that the tragedy was attributed largely to pilot inexperience. He's thinking that the NTSB published a final report which concluded that the tragedy was attributable largely to pilot inexperience and error. Did they not even read the report? I'm going to show you what's in the report here. Charles Schumer also had to run for re-election just here last week, and guess what? He won. Charles Schumer is all about public image. He wants you to know that he's fighting for his constituents. Here's his webpage right here. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Here he is. He's also pretty close with Hillary. Looks to me like he's real close. Let's take a look at Flying Magazine. Here's what Flying Magazine wrote. It says, now this has to do with the PTS. Until recently, the Practical Test Standards, which is the testing guidelines for airline transport pilot, it test call for the loss of altitude and stall recovery to be not less than 100 feet. So if you're on top of things, ready in some cases, and you're strong enough, it's saying that you have to be strong enough to pull. That's not strong enough to push, that's strong enough to pull. During a stall recovery, you have to pull. This is FAA mandated training. This is Pavlov's dog. You have to be strong enough to pull. After Buffalo, however, the question was raised, does the 100-foot standard send a dangerous message that a loss of altitude is unacceptable under any circumstance? That was, after all, the direct message in the practical test. More than 100 feet loss of altitude and you fail. In the case of Colgan 3407, the pilot responded in a way that made no sense aerodynamically. Was the training to blame? Of course the training was to blame. This pilot responded the way he was trained, checked, and brainwashed into pulling during stall recovery. He did not want to lose more than 100 feet. Let's take a look at the actual PTS. Here it is right here. This is an airline transport pilot practical test standards for airplane, February 2001. Let's read right out of this. When Captain Renslow took his check ride, this is the standard that he was under. Using maximum power, allowing only the acceptable altitude loss. The FAA in those days said minus 100 to plus 500 feet. If you lose more than 100 feet during a stall recovery, you fail. This purely explains why Captain Renslow was pulling aft on the control yoke during his stall. Now, what was the credentials of Captain Renslow and Rebecca Shaw? Well, Captain Renslow had 3,300 flight hours in an ATP. Ms. Shaw, Rebecca Shaw, she had 2,244 hours in an ATP. They had more than enough flight time. This entire Colgan 1,500-hour rule has nothing to do with how many hours they have. It has more to do with these two individual politicians wanting to get reelected, wanting you to think that they're fighting for your rights and to memorialize the victims in Colgan 3407. That's what this whole thing is really about. Now, did it do any good? I want to put this slide up here. The 1,500-hour rule has made airline flying less safe. I think it's made airline flying less safe. Why? Because there's not enough people going in, not enough people started. Airlines can't get pilots. Consequently, they're willing to hire anybody with a heartbeat. Nowadays, when I get on a wide-body major airline, I stick my head in the cockpit. Most of the time, I see two kids up there that look like they should be in high school that were probably just breastfeeding last week. They're young. They don't have experience. Mr. Schumer and Ms. Gillibrand, you have caused this. You have caused our cockpits to be completely void of experience. When I get on an airplane and stick my head in the cockpit, I want to see some gray hair up there. I want to see some real gray hair. It's not there today, and it's going to get worse. We're about to have the next fatal Part 121 major airline crash on American soil. I don't know who it's going to be. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I can tell you, I'm going to name it right now. This is the Gillibrand-Schumer airliner fatal. It's going to be caused by crew inexperience, crew pairing of two very inexperienced people flying a heavy wide-body airplane that got into weather, mechanical, abnormal, that they could not handle. They did not have the experience to handle it, and it's a complete loss. Everybody dead. It's going to happen. We're going to have a fatal in the United States, and I'm naming it right now. I can tell you when this airplane goes in, I'll be there with my video camera because I'm going to tell you, I'm naming it right now. This is the Gillibrand-Schumer fatal, and it's about to happen. We have made airline flying in America far less safe because we can't get people. Now we're willing to accept anyone. Now let's talk about general aviation flight training. I'm using a video from the Baron pilot. This is posted, they did it at Sporty's, but I'm going to show you exactly what they did here. They took this girl out. They tried to teach her how to fly, but she was afraid of stalls. Look at her during her flying. She's afraid of stalls. Look at her in the briefing. She's still crying because she can't pull aft hard enough.
And I'm pulling back as hard as I can. And I can't literally physically pull anymore.
Because she can't pull aft hard enough.
And he's like, oh, maybe we'll have you do both hands for back pressure. And he's like, oh, maybe we'll have you do both hands for back pressure. And he's like, oh, maybe we'll have you do both hands for back pressure.
They're trying to convince her to pull. Now look at her stall recovery. I'm going to put you in flight here. This is actual footage from their channel. During stall recovery, they're at 3,950 feet. Watch this. They're trying also not to lose altitude during a stall. He says nose down, but they don't actually lower the nose. They maintain 3,950 feet during recovery, and that's what they're trying to do. Take a look at this clip.
We're looking for 65 knots. Again, we're pretending like we're coming in on final. So we got the runway out in front of us. We're coming in on final approach. Okay, now you're going to pull the power to idle. You're just going to start to bring the nose up slowly. Bring the nose up. Yep, bring it up more back pressure. Yep, more back pressure. Yep, just hold it steady, There you go. Hold it steady. Hold it steady, bring it back up. Okay, go. Full power.
Hit nose down.
Yep, nose down, and you need right rudder as well now. Full power.
Hit nose down.
Yep, nose down, and you need right rudder as well now. Full power.
Hit nose down.
Yep, nose down, and you need right rudder as well now.
Now here's a clip when I did it in a little airplane just recently.
Come right. Full power. There you go. Now you're losing altitude. Now speed's coming back. Keep on pushing.
Look how much nose down I gave it, and look how much altitude I lost. See the VSI going down? I told the guy during stall recovery, I want to see full power. I want to see nose down. I want to see you lose altitude.
Come right. Full power. There you go. Now you're losing altitude. Now speed's coming back. Keep on pushing.
When you lose altitude, you're going to unload this wing, and unloading the wing is going to make this wing fly. That's what gets you out of the stall. Fighting to maintain altitude by brainwashing people to pull aft is absolutely the wrong thing to do. Now, the other thing I saw in the Baron pilot series with this girl, They're still teaching her to go flaps up, full power during recovery, full power flaps up. The thing that caused Colgan 3407 was two factors. Number one, the captain pulled against the stick pusher. Number two, Rebecca Shaw went click, click. She said, I'll put the flaps up, then you hear the click, click. NTSB got this wrong. She said, I'll put the flaps up, then you hear click, click. During his stall recovery, she retracted the flaps arbitrarily as per her flight training. Watch this clip of the girl up here in Sporties in Batavia, Ohio. Watch her during her go-around. Listen to what she says, flaps up, full power. This is low to the ground, out of energy. She goes full power, flaps up. Listen to this.
Oh, no. Let's do a go-around.
Yep, go around, full throttle.
Yep.
Flaps up.
Oh, no. Let's do a go-around.
Yep, go around, full throttle.
Yep.
Flaps up.
Here it is again. Listen to this. Listen to her say, flaps up.
Full throttle.
Yep.
Flaps up.
So there's what you have. I'm kind of fired up about this entire Colgan thing. This is not good. The entire thing, Schumer and Gillibrand, you ought to be ashamed of yourselves. You're going exactly opposite. If you wanted to make this even safer, according to your theory, let's just require everybody to have 10,000 hours before they can get a commuter job. That would make it really safe. Then guess what? There's nobody going on. There's nobody going to fly airplanes, and you're going to have to get third graders to fly your airplanes and pay them well. It's the exact opposite effect of what you think is happening. The reason is because nobody in Congress making these decisions, making these laws, none of our lawmakers are pilots. None of these people actually understand what they're really doing, and it's the exact opposite of what you think that you're doing, and it's already been devastating. It's going to be even more devastating when we lose the next wide-body U.S. domestic airliner in a Gillibrand Schumer fatal, and it's fixing to happen. What the real problem is that our general aviation flight training in those days is the same as it is today. It's teaching students to recover by adding full power, pulling back, and putting the flaps up at the same time. The approved recovery technique is full power, flaps up, and pull back.
Keep that nose up. Keep it up. We want to be climbing. Stall recovery. Think stall recovery.
So I got to get out of here. I appreciate you watching this Colgan 3407. I appreciate your comments. This is not good. None of this is good, but I'm going to get this video up and on the air, and I appreciate you watching. For my tiny little, itty-bitty, fledgling YouTube channel, Dan Grider, Probable Cause. During stall recovery, I don't think it's a minimum altitude loss. I think we should set a precedent for losing at least 200 feet during stall recovery. We have got to lower the nose and lose altitude. Full power, lose some altitude. Don't touch flaps, don't touch anything. Full power, nose down, lose some altitude. Then eventually consider flaps. We have got to make that change in general aviation flight training. It's conditioning. We're conditioning our pilots to do the wrong thing during the time of crisis.
You can train for an emergency as much as you want, and when something actually happens, you never know how you're going to react.
I know myself, and if I get to a point where I'm overwhelmed, I shut down, and that's what's happening. But I'm trying to push through.